Welcome, Dr. Anino Emuwa. And I'm really so grateful for you to make time for this because first of all, I know how extremely busy your schedule is. And also because I know that you've just been through a lot with the loss of your late mother, short of her 90th birthday. I read a lot about her after you announced, and I got a glimpse of what an incredible trailblazer she has been at a time where women really were not seen and heard. And yeah, so thank you so much, Anino, for being here with me today.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the acknowledgement and the condolences. Thank you.
Yes. So before we get started and before we talk about a shift in your life that really has propelled your career into a different direction, I would like to ask you some questions to warm up. It's early in the morning here. What is your current state of mind?
Well, my current state of mind, I think, is despite everything, is positive. And I think it comes from the sense of determination and clarity about how important it is, the work that we're doing. And that's really what makes me feel positive, not on my own. It's also with incredible women and men who totally believe in that. So it's difficult times, but I think there's that sort of positivity because there are many people who feel the same.
Thank you. If you had a magic wand and could shift one thing in the world today, what would it be?
Well, and there's no doubt about it. It will be the total inclusion with women working side by side with men in leadership, predominantly, and then, in general in the workplace. There's no doubt about
What is your superpower?
it. I think, shall I say resilience? I think resilience. I think it is. That is, despite or it doesn't matter what it is, and just figuring out that one just should go on, right? Even when the energy is low or whatever it is, or there, not so positive things. I think it's just for me, just resilience, really.
If you look back at the past week, what made you smile?
Oh gosh. What made me smile? Actually, I can't extract the last week from what I went through. And I think just even the memories and recollections of my mother and seeing how people were acknowledging her and what she meant to them, really, and reading or hearing, I think that made me smile. It gave me sort of positive, right? Positive feelings that this was a life that was impactful to so many others. So I think that's it, really.
Yeah, thank you. So I could imagine that your mother, the role model that she was as a woman, as a person in law, in business, in leadership, really, um, instilled also your strong take on equality, gender parity in leadership, and general fairness. So it would be great if you can share with me this moment where you personally realize that women are just still so repressed in leadership, and when you decided, okay, that's it, this is what I'm going to devote my work to and my life to. Was there a particular experience, or when did this really hit you?
Claudia, I think it was a multiplicity of events really that hit me. As you know, my career started in corporate banking and lending to multinationals, and then I was interested in entrepreneurs. But then I found out that I was actually working with female entrepreneurs and seeing the barriers that they had in accessing finance, right? And so this is decades ago. So that was certainly, the first moment, really. There was also another moment which was personal, which it didn't really dawn on me until later. And that was simply, as a high performing corporate banker, which was the work that I wanted to do, the work that I enjoyed, right? And I then became a mother. And as a mother with a young child, you're quite clear about your work. Your work has to be, I mean, you're right in front of the client. You have to perform and everything. And that is the focus, without a doubt. But at the same time, it is you do, you then organize yourself, right, in the right ways that would balance, your responsibilities, which wasn't working less, it was working differently. And so the numbers still counted, the performance was still high. In fact, at a level where when we're looking at performance and reward based on what you're generating, that it got to stages where, it's like, oh my gosh, she's generating so much. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I had a supervisor who said to me, who said, in my what do you call it? The sort of reports, I can't remember the word for it, skips my mind, reviews, and said, oh, in this period of time, Anino is taking time off for maternity leave, taking time off, for Easter, taking time off for this, taking time for that. Maternity leave is statutory. All the other leaves put together were still the part of my leave. So it was still my annual leave, but I'd taken it and requested for it and got approval in little bits rather than long bits, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
yet you still had that negativity where the performance was excellent, revenues were generated. So that for me was personal. I didn't think of it as a woman's thing. It was later on I then realized. Then I had my daughter, and my daughter was then going into the corporate world and everything. And then I asked her in investment banking that how many other women applied for the role. And she said to me that not very many. And I thought, oh gosh, that's strange. And why is that? And then I started looking at the stats, right? Looking at the stats, that is to say, looking at how many women go into this feeder courses, etc. And went back to my time when I studied economics. I never looked at it. I never thought about it. And actually seeing that I was a minority as a woman, but I never looked at myself. I never realized that I was a minority in economics, minority in banking, minority in anything I did, because that wasn't the way that I was brought up in my education and at home. And then I realized there was a systemic issue, and individual performance wasn't going to make things change, that it had to be concerted, global, collaborative, changing the systems that would make things happen, not just for justice. Coming from an economic background, it was really about improving the state of the world, improving our businesses, society, sustainability, everything required to have the best talent possible. And that's men and women together.
Yeah. And you move the world. I mean, with your you are the managing director of Avandis Consulting, but you also are the founder and started 100 Women at Davos, and that just also spinned off like nothing before. And you are connecting women from all over the world, leaders, women with incredible startups that really have an impact in various fields. And this is such a force. How do you feel this is beginning to manifest? And what is your goal with these incredible movements? Last week you spoke at the UN, the General Assembly, and those are such amazing achievements. And as you said, you are doing it within this community that you have created of bringing all these women globally together. What can we what can we expect from this? Yeah.
Claudia, the thing about it is, when you are doing something and, the way you represented it and seeing how it's sort of you spiraled upwards, right? It is of a reflection of the fact that you hit upon something that women wanted, not that you created something that anybody didn't want. So it's all about reflecting
Hmm.
what people wanted. And that is actually my work. What is it that women want? What do they need? And you would find that most women, and that is the reason why we have impact, right? Impact is at our core. So yes, it is for the women themselves, but the women in the community have a bigger mission for the world. And that is what absolutely brings it together. And when you say to me, what is the end goal? I can tell you that I want to reach the end goal. And that's the thing about working when you have a mission. because my end goal and my satisfaction and would only happen if we have, a women's representation properly in leadership, complete representation. But is it going to happen in my lifetime? Well, they say it will take maybe on the leadership side, right? Equality is about 123, but on leadership side, it's even longer, about 200 years. Now, my work is to work together with others, women and men, to make it a lot closer in our lifetime, right? In a lifetime. Would it happen in my time at work? It's not going to happen, right? Okay, I have a limited amount of years, at work. So in a sense, there is a goal, there's a vision. It won't be met, but let us break it down to the daily work that we do. Very often, because when you have a mission, you're focusing on the end goal, which is a huge goal, right? And just what can be my contribution. But you know something, Claudia, we went to the stats, right? We went to the stats of the community and we found that we had representation. And this is, today, if you listen to previous podcasts or interviews or what I've written, I'd probably say 32 women. It's not. We went into the stats and the office calculated, and we saw that we had women from 109 countries of the world, right, in our community, right? And when we looked at, of course, and Europe is the biggest because, we're a European company, because we started in Davos as well. But, from Asia, we had, women from, I think, 20 or 30 countries in Asia, right? I think we covered almost 30-40% of most countries, right? Oceania was only 1 out of 17, so we have a lot of work to do there. We only have Australia, we don't have New Zealand and all those islands, right? And that, began to tell you that why is it that I thought it was 32 and it's actually 109? Because my focus was always on where we're going to. Yes, you have to look back and reflect, but that made me really happy because it tells us that it is universal. Because the women we have in our community, are not really because we reached out to them, one or two, it's because they reached out to us. So the end goal is to bring people working together in this mission who know and feel that is important for themselves, but more importantly, for the world.
So you are based in Paris and you are originally from Nigeria. What can you share about a shift happening on the continent for women in leadership, for women as entrepreneurs? I I feel it's so much untapped potential. And as Westerners, Europeans, I'm living, or I've been living in the US for the most time of my life. Africa I feel, is still so underrepresented, and I'm so curious about it. Yeah. And I feel there is so much that we can still learn and understand about this continent. But in particular, how are women moving forward there in leadership and entrepreneurship?
Yes, and it is truly important for the world. When we look at Africa, that is going to be the engine of growth for the world, simply because our youth population is enormous, right? When we compare to the population of most of the advanced countries that are declining. So we are going to power the world in terms of youth and contribute, to pensions, to growth, etc. So that's the first thing, the immense potential. For what has been happening, right, over the last, not few years, decades, but hasn't really been represented, right, in very often in the media, because the media, if you look at the media tends to like to represent bad news everywhere, right? So you tend to have bad news represented, which means that for people who want to hear about what is happening, they actually have to search, right? If you look at the economic growth and the per capita growth of Africa over the last 20 years, and this is research which I've done, it is multiplied. It's been the fastest growing region in the world over the last probably, decade, with the exception of maybe China, right? Okay. So it's fast growing in terms of the economy. Of course, there are issues with insecurity, issues with conflict, issues with poverty. We know there's all of that, but we have to look at the trajectory, right? So it is where you start from, but it's also where you're going to. So that's the first thing. Then when you then look at what is happening and with women and youth, given that kind of background, the first thing is that there's so many areas. One is technology. When we look at the rate of growth of adoption of technology, creation of technology by the youth populations in Africa, that is a massive growth area. Then we look at, for example, youth, and we look at culture. Culture from when it comes to music, which is dominating really now when we have to do with the movie industry in Nigeria, my country of origin, Nollywood, we call it. So N for Nigeria, so rather than Hollywood, Nollywood, right? And the amount, and it's a massive industry, music, pop music, culture, art, design, right? These are areas where we see immense growth. And fintech, the payments industry, right? Side by side, the challenges without a doubt, but also this is where the growth is happening. And then when we look at the role of women, and incidentally, I just did a post yesterday on talking about women, talking about youth in Nigerian women and youth, and it's simply because three just examples in the last couple of weeks. First of all was the UN poet laureate, right, which was just appointed, is a Nigerian, right? The first that was appointed happens to be Nigerian, so the post was about Nigeria, but an African, right? The second thing was, in the basketball and in football, where my country of origin, Nigeria, dominated, right, and won, and they've been winning for years. Like these items of news don't really get represented, right? Okay, and how women are so really coming out in terms of sports. So sports, art, culture, technology, all of it is happening at the same time. Interestingly, I did a research study, which was a few years back, which was with a UK company, just looking at the percentages, right, of women in leadership at the biggest companies in Africa. That is the publicly, the PLCs, publicly limited quoted companies. And it was interesting to actually see that the rate of women in executive management and board was actually higher, right, in those companies, right, than in a country like the US. Do we hear that news? No, we don't hear that news, right? There's a lot to be done because it wasn't equal. We know, of course, that it varied across the continent in terms of for religious reasons. There were a lot of countries in the northern part of the continent that were under the average, right? So it's also a mixed bunch. So we can't really talk about Africa, a continent with 54 countries, as if it's uniform. It's not uniform. There's a lot happening in different ways. So yes, we do have, the difficulties and challenges, but we do have the opportunities and the growth. And this is where we need to invest more in women, invest more in youth, and allow really women and youth to flourish really and drive development, not just in Africa, but even further afield.
Mhm. So your personal shift in really this dedication to bringing women and men in leadership together and to fostering women in leadership is an ongoing wave, and it's an ongoing shift, luckily. What would you say is holds women back in your experience? I mean, you said you have this close network, or this big network of 109 countries represented at the 100 Women at Davos. What have you detected is maybe still, or yeah, still something that holds women back to shift, to take this extra leap, to take this extra step towards leadership, to say, is it internally in companies? Has it also personal reasons? Where are we with this, in your opinion?
I think this is really an important idea or important point to cover. The reason because, very often we see people who are focusing on the internal, on the women, on the organization's policy. The truth is that it is all of that, which is why we do all of that to a certain extent. Um, the reasons are historical because when we look at the workplace, right, it's determined by 200 years of industrialization, and the social status of women was very different then. But with education and women getting of the degrees is not reflecting, right, in leadership. And so there's one is the socialization. Society has socialized not just men, not just women, women and men to behave in certain way, in certain rules. So there's a socialization breaking out of that, right? There's two, because that socialization also determines, right, what you do and how you do it and how just how organizations reward and almost punish you in a sense, right? So if, for example, you are assertive, right, you might be called aggressive as a woman, right, assertive for a man, because women weren't seen in those roles. So you have all of those, right, and therefore the response is therefore not to be because you are not rewarded for that kind of behavior that your male colleague is. So we also need to change organizations and their behavior and not just organization, the institutionalization, right, of certain of these ways of doing things. And that's both men and women in organizations. So we need to do that. We also need to change policies. There's some policies. There is no country in the world that has equal rights in the workplace for men and women. None, for historical reasons, right? So you have all of that. So and if women have been left out of knowledge and networks and all of that, we have to equip them, right, with the knowledge and networks of how to progress into these positions. So it is a combination of all three is really the answer.
Hmm. And the men you work with, are they, what needs to happen, or does anything need to happen? I think it does. Um, for for these, historical networks that are just existing, and make it challenging for women to rise into leadership as well. What needs to happen, or what is actually already happening, very tender and slow, to come to this leadership where both are represented equally? What can they
Yes.
do?
Yes, that's the thing. Of course, we hear about words like male allies, right? Which is not my favorite term. The reason why, because an ally tends to say this is somebody who's having issues and somebody who's helping them, whereas it's something that affects everybody, right? So it's men who also believe in the same, and there are very many of them in leadership. Um, I think what the issue is, whether it's socialization or whatever it is, to do with the workplace, we have very often certain behaviors that we can determine on. This is some work which I'm looking at. Women tend to be more social, men tend to be more hierarchical. And the hierarchical of men and when men are silent about certain things is not relating necessarily to women, it's relating to themselves as well. Women will bring in issues and want to deal with all of them. Men will go according to the hierarchy, what the hierarchy says. This is a generalization. Please accept that. But just generally speaking, this is what we observe and is observed by research. So, which means that men do not merely stick out their necks to say this is wrong and this is, they will do what, the hierarchy says they should do, right? Okay. So it is moving from that. So it's moving men, right, in leadership who know and who are even adopting it in their work as leaders, right? That it's not going to change if you just do it in your work. You need to do it outside your work. You need to speak to the other men who are not doing it. It's not just yourself, right? And that is a big change, which I think is still absolutely waiting to happen. Because if we have more men who are doing this and who are not silent and who are leaders, who are big leaders, not to be a silent, right? In the sense that they need to move towards, lending the voice to this, which is not the normal way that men behave in anything, really, then I think that that's when the big change also will happen. So that is another frontier that needs to be crossed or breached, yes.
And you have a lot of work to do. We all have a lot of work to do. Wow.
Yes, we do. We do. We do. Absolutely.
So I want to ask you, you said before your superpower is resilience and not giving up, and you seem to be everywhere at the same time almost. How do you do this on a personal level? Like how do you maneuver through your work life, through your many engagements? How do you take a moment to anchor yourself? How do you do it? And if you are low energy, what do you do to energize yourself?
Yes, and it's important, and especially for women, because the reality is that we tend to have lots of other responsibilities outside work. Not that men don't do, they do, but we tend to be the primary caregivers, right? Whether it's in aging parents, whether it's in children, whether it's in society, we tend to do that, right? So you have all these other responsibilities, then you have work, and then and all of that. And for me, I think it's two things. One is sort of recognizing the boundaries of your energy. And I know, right, that I push the boundaries. There is no doubt about that. So I don't want to pretend that it's so balanced that I don't. I do push the boundaries, but I push the boundaries only to a certain extent, right? And because, luckily I do have control over my time, luckily I use that control. So, for example, I know that we're going to the UN General Assembly. I'm going to be there for 7 days. It's going to be incredibly busy. In fact, we have three summits, right, in September. One is the Luxury Innovation Summit, which is about women and wealth and innovation and also sustainability. And then a few days later, we're going to be in Marseille for the Global Women's Leadership Summit, where we are doing the moderating the keynote panel at the end and launching this movement on behalf of another organization. And then a week later, well, 2 days later, we're going to be in Unger. Now, in between that, right, those are when you wind down, right? So I know that I'm on high energy for the week, but as soon as I come back, I know that I have to keep those moments, right, where I really, gather up my energy again. So it is certainly, it's a bit like that. It's a bit like a wave, and to be conscious of it, and also do the things that make you healthy. I need to do more of them. There's no doubt about that. But try and do that. And importantly, for me, is support of the family is critical in all of that, right? Really, really important for me as well.
Yes, because family time is very nourishing and recuperating. Just
Yes.
going back to what you also said that women still are the primary caregivers. So there's a lot of silent work that is being done. Sweat
Yes.
equity, it's called.
Yes.
How can we create even more awareness of it, acceptance and respect for it, and maybe even compensation at some point in the near future?
Yes, and in fact, this is one of the areas. I sit on the advisory board as well of the Reykjavik Global Forum, and this. Of course, we know that Iceland is one of the most gender equal. It is the most gender equal nation on earth, right? And even still, they're still not sitting still. And one of the issues that we address, one of the E's, is exactly that, right? So in terms of childcare, so one is to make a system where um, parents, right, are equally responsible, or the caregiver, both caregivers, right? We know that, of course, very often you have women who may be single parents. So that is, a certainly different dynamic, right, as well. But
Mhm.
really, the responsibility should fall on both. And part of that is also another way of socializing again, right? Because men and women have been socialized into these roles, right? To know that it's equally, because it's important for the upbringing of the child anyway. Then part of it also is in terms of policies. If the policy only gives government policy, or the organization policy only gives leave to women, for example, then it falls on women as well. So we need to have equal childcare policies as well for women. Things like countries should have things like accessible childcare is really important, right? That where parents can actually afford to pay for childcare. When you can't, it's a problem. We know the countries in the world where women don't even have a paid maternity leave. So there's a lot to do on the policy side. Organizations can actually help as well, but also changing the way people think, right, about responsibilities, I think is really very important as well, because that is certainly one barrier that holds, women back. We see women dropping off at certain mid-career very often, women who are primed for leadership. And when you're in a situation where you see that you're not, maybe you're not moving as fast as your male colleagues, and there's bias, right? And then you're also juggling with, childcare. Sometimes some women just say, okay, look, I had better just focus on the one that, I have control over, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so it's something, but it's collective. I should look at it as collective responsibility.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, and you're really leading this collective responsibility and inspiring it, and with your work. So that's fantastic. So you have as next steps, there is, as you just mentioned, a very busy September with summits and the United Nations Week. And what is next for the coming year?
Oh, yes, it's well, we're going to try and get over this year first. Because when we talk about the September reset, it's a September dash for us, really.
Yeah,
We have a lot of things coming, and we try to do also some digital events as well, some masterclasses and workshops for women in leadership in sort of unusual areas. We have one
yeah,
on wealth coming, we have another one on storytelling for leaders coming, also in the October period. There's of course COP30, which is coming in Brazil.
mhm,
And there's G20 in South Africa. We're still planning that. So we still have all of that coming this year. But of course, the big thing for us, of course, is Davos. So we have Davos in January, which we are planning towards. Last year was our biggest, but simply because that's just a numbers game, simply because each year we grow. So we had 150 women at our welcome dinner, and we had over 600 of our community who were
yeah,
actually in Davos, so that
yeah,
was amazing. So that is
yeah,
the big thing, and that takes off most of January. By that time, we're
yeah,
into the end of January. But then of course we have the constant summits that we have, the participating. We want to do a lot more in terms of bringing our women together on digitally important, on really cutting edge topics that is worth the time. People are busy, so we must make sure that it's something that speaks to their needs as well.
yeah. Yeah, and 100 women at Davos. It was an amazing gathering last year. I mean, the energy in the room was just unbelievable, and so many women again from all over connected on such a meaningful level. So thank you so much for creating that and initiating that, and thank you for your time today. Anino, I wish you all the best for what's coming next in September. And yes, I will follow your work and be part of the 100 Women at Davos because I think it really is so impactful and useful and yay, yay to
No,
women.
yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure and delight having you as one of us. And thank you so much. Really honored to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good rest of your day, Anino.
Thank you. Bye for
Bye
now.
bye. Bye.